the Havoc Demon Hunter. You either love it or you hate it. Or if you like me, just think of it as, it's okay. But what no one can deny is how amazing it looks. But in between those amazing animations and effects can hide a frustratingly, mechanically dull spec. Depending on your build and personal preferences, of course. Because thankfully your talent tree helps you a bit on that aspect. With that said, what this spec hopes to accomplish is to be simple to play, do loads of damage, while at the same time look cool, and that is where it can be appealing to so many people. Let's just start with your talents, because here is where your gameplay and rotation will be defined, because you have two different types of builds that will change how you play your Demon Hunter. The Chaos Blades / Demon Blades build, more focused on single target, especially burst, but still having a solid cleave and AoE. The other is Demonic, having a more sustained single target DPS but weaker than the previous build. Its AoE though, it's where it shines, especially in Mythic Pluses where a lot of your focus is in your I-Beam ability and all the buffs that comes with it from your talents. So to optimize your DPS, you would be looking at changing between those two builds depending on your content or encounters to get the best results. But before going further, let's just look at your talents and artifact traits and then rotation for the Demon Blades build and then Demonic. Timings for each topic are in the description if you wish to skip certain parts, and I'll go in more depth in each talent choice during the rotation part of the guide. So in the first tier you want to take Fellblade, then Demon Blades, First Blood. Next is your own personal choice. Soul Rending is probably where you get the most advantage out of, boosting your survivability when in meta. Desperate Instincts and Netherwalk though can be useful for some situations where you're going to get the damage reduction buff or you're going to need the extra mobility. After, Nemesis or Momentum for AoE, boosting your Fell Rush. Then it's again somewhat personal preference. Unleashed Power is probably what you want to have most of the time for more easy and frequent Chaos Nova stuns, but when it's useless, such as most raid bosses, Master of the Glaive can be as useful for the second charge of True Glaive, as it's your filler ability when you have nothing to click. Demon Reborn is more focused towards the demonic build, but you can also take it here when you know that you're going to pop meta in AoE or cleave situations to get them I-beams. Lastly, Chaos Blades, for single target or Fell Barrage if you're going to need the extra AoE and you're sticking with the Demon Blades build. Now for your artifacts, you're going to get a variety of buffs for your abilities. If you're still building your traits, you can find in the background one of the best paths you can take. Like the talents, I'll go more in depth in some of them in the rotation side. As for your new traits from the 7.2, sadly I haven't had the time to get them all as I'm playing a variety of different classes at the same time, but getting an understanding of them is pretty easy. White Eyes is simply reducing your I-beams for more frequent and easy use of them. Blade Dancer's Grace is simply a flat damage increase to your Blade Dance, and Chaotic Onslaught is another flat damage increase for Chaos Strike, having a 10% chance to do an additional one, but more on that in a bit. As for the order of taking of your new ranks of your older traits, should be Critical Chaos, Chaos Vision, Demon Rage, Contained Fury, Unleashed Demons and Sharpened Glaives. The remaining are on your personal choice for the order, as they are mostly utility based. Okay, so let's go over your rotation, and it really is quite simple. All of your focus is on Chaos Strikes and getting lucky with the RNG on your Fury build up. First, let's talk about your burst, which is what this build is all about. So you're going to start up by popping up Metamorphosis, lasting for 30 seconds and improving your Chaos Strike and Blade Dance to Annihilation and Death Sweep that do about 50% more damage and giving you 25% haste. Now in this window is your most crucial moment during any encounter. You want to get the most out of your damage in this phase, and your talents are tailored to fit this playstyle. So for that, you also want to use Nemesis, boosting your overall damage by 25% for 1 minute, plus giving you a buff for the remaining time if the target dies, for that specific enemy type. Most of the time you're going to use it in bosses, so you don't really need to worry about that. then Chaos Blades and overall boost to your damage depending on your mastery and improving your auto attack damage by 150%, getting some really good damage in there and does chaos damage instead of physical during its duration. Then Fury of Illidari is mostly an AoE ability, but the damage it gives off is quite high, so you want to use it whenever you can. So what you need to worry about now is doing the maximum amount of chaos strikes that you can, or in this case, Annihilation. Annihilation is always going to be your top damaging ability, even though you're going to only use it in meta for a total of 60 to 90 seconds if you're able to activate it 2 to 3 times during a raid boss fight, for an example. That's how much damage it can do, hence its importance. Along with it, you're obviously going to need to have a good Fury build-up along with using your Blade Dance or Death Sweep every time it's off cooldown due to the First Blood talent. It vastly increases its single target damage for a little Fury of 15. Plus, with the new trait buff and possibly the new tier set bonus, makes it a very important ability to use. So, to get Fury, you're going to need a good RNG and using Fell Blade correctly. Now, Demon Blades turns your rotation into a quite boring playstyle because you lose your main filler and Fury generator button, Demon's Bite, to make it entirely passive, proccing from your auto attacks and having a 60% chance to give you 12 to 20 Fury. Haste does improve its chance since it increases your attack speed, so in this phase that you are in meta, you're also getting an extra chance at it. But what's good about it is that you don't lose global cooldowns like in Demon's Bite, and you can just focus on your Chaos Strikes, and with good procs from the almighty RNG Jesus, you can just spam those Chaos Strikes and Blade Dances for some really good damage. But you also have Fellblade. It's going to give you 30 Fury for a reasonable amount of damage on a 15-second cooldown. However, your Demon's Bite, or in this case Demon Blades, have a chance to refresh its cooldown. So, for you to maximize Fell Blades, you want to use them whenever you get set procs, as you don't want to overwrite a next potential one. It's off cooldown, you use it, even if you have enough Fury for Chaos Strikes or Blade Dances. Just don't use when reaching close to your Fury cap, about 70%, as you also don't want to overcap it. If below those 70%, you use it immediately, so you can get as many as you possibly can, and all that juicy Fury along with it. With that said, Chaos Strike costs 40 Fury, meaning you're going to have to cast a Fell Blade once and get a Demon Blade proc to be able to use it, or get 2 or 3 Demon Blade procs. But if Chaos Strike crits, it refunds you 20 Fury, half of its cost, meaning as you get more and more crit, your rotation is going to flow much better, even if your RNG isn't great from both Fellblade and Demon Blades. Along with that, there's Chaotic Onslaught trait. You get that 10% chance to do an additional Chaos Strike for free. If that one crits, you're also getting a free 20 Fury. Plus, there's also the chance to proc your Inner Demon, giving some extra damage. So with all of that said, that's how your burst rotation is going to go down. Prioritize Fellblade if below 70% Fury, cast as many Annihilations as you possibly can, along with Death Sweeps, plus your Chaos Blades cooldown and Nemesis and obviously meta, and you're really going to get some good damage. And you can always mix in Troglaive when you have nothing to click. Now, once meta and in turn your burst ends, your rotation is not going to change. Everything said here will stay. It will simply slow down for obvious reasons. But you want to get as many as your other cooldowns in there, and you also want to combine them whenever possible for optimal effect. So, in between your first set of bursts with meta and all your other cooldowns, you'll be able to cast a solo Chaos Blades Nemesis combo after 2 minutes from that initial burst. And then after 2 minutes more, you'll be able to do a triad once again, meta, Nemesis and Chaos Blades. As for Fury of the Illidari, is on a 1 minute cooldown, so you're going to get some solo ones, but if you use them correctly, you're always going to be able to combo them with your other DPS cooldowns. Now, as for I-Beam, you don't want to fit in your single target rotation, solely to be used in Cleave or AoE. As for Fell Rush, you also don't really want to fit it unless you need the movement. The reason being that you want to stay still for your Demon Blades to proc. As in, you always want to have your character inside the hitbox of your enemy, so you can auto-attack and give you the procs. When you Fell Rush, your character turns away from the mob, and in turn losing potential Demon Blade procs, as in those 1 to 2 seconds your character isn't auto-attacking, so save it for mobility or cleaving/AoE only. Remember that you can charge to enemies with Fell Blade and is more reliable to do so. Save up Fell Brushes for other moments. As for AoE or even cleaving, your rotation will stay pretty much the same. You will simply mix Fell Rushes and prioritize I-Beam along with Fury of Illidari, which those two are the best AoE abilities that you possess, and both of them are boosted by your artifact traits, getting some extra damage after their duration. In this build, your AoE isn't as great as the next build that we're going to talk about, but is still pretty good. If you're really going to do an AoE run though, you might want to spec into Momentum and even Fell Barrage, as the other talents are going to be pretty much useless in these situations. So this is how it's going to go. Fell Rush to get momentum, remember to always get that buff before using any big cooldown for the 20% damage buff, then Fury of the Illidari, Fell Blade to get Fury if needed, and I-Beam, followed by Blade Dance, and then just switch between them when off cooldown, with Chaos Strikes to fill in along with some Fell Rushes. That's pretty much it. If you spec into Fell Barrage, remember to use it after getting momentum for the buff and as you get stacks from attacking enemies, meaning you want to get rid of them at the start of the fight so you can build them up again. Only use it if at 5 stacks. Now your I-Beam, due to your Feast on the Souls trait, gets its cooldown reduced by 5 seconds for each soul fragment consumed, which drops from every mob you kill, allowing for more I-Beams per trash bag for an example. In this build isn't as a big deal nor as frequent, but in the demonic build is going to be far more important. So that pretty much sums up to be everything you need to know about this build. Now demonic is more tailored to dungeon or mythic plus content, or just AoE in general. However, it isn't as good as a previous build for a single target. But before all of that, let's just go over your talents again as they differ from previously. And again, I'll say the whys in the rotation part. So the first tier you want is Blind Fury, then Demonic Appetite, Chaos Cleave or First Blood for a single target, if you so wish to pursue it there, Momentum or Nemesis, again if single target, Demon Reborn, and obviously Demonic. So in this build is highly focused on your I-Beam ability with the Demonic talent, turning you into meta for 8 seconds at the end of each channel. And remember that the Demon Reborn talent does not proc from this, but can benefit you in another way. More on that in a bit. Now the idea here is still on Chaos Strikes as it's still your highest damaging ability in single target, but in Cleave and AoE, which is where this spec shines, all the focus is on I-Beam. Along with it, there's the Soul Fragments, very important to this build, reducing your I-Beam cooldown from the trait and giving you Fury for the Demon Appetite talent. All of that equals really good AoE damage. To explain it better, let's go over the rotation. First for AoE, as it's where it's meant for, and then single target, if you so wish to go there. So in the startup of a fight, you want to build up your Fury quickly for I-Beam, and of course using your Fury of Illidari whenever possible. You no longer have Demon Blades, so you're going to have to build up Fury with Demon's Bite. Once again, once you get enough Fury to use I-Beam and remember to combo with Momentum, you're obviously going to do a great deal of damage as it always crits, but due to your Blind Fury talent, not only is going to increase its duration and in turn damage, it's also giving you Fury while it's being channeled, giving about 50 to 70% of your total Fury. So after doing loads of damage from the beam alone, you also got almost a full bar of Fury and got turned into meta, all ready to waste all that delicious Fury in Annihilations and Death Sweeps, along with some Fell Rushes to fill the gaps. Once again, it boosts your damage by 20%, so make sure to try and weave it in before doing I-Beam or Fury of Illidari. Now, due to Chaos Cleave talent, your Chaos Strikes are also going to cleave all nearby targets for 10% of the damage done on your primary target. On top, due to Demon Appetite, Chaos Strike also has 25% chance to spawn a soul fragment that you normally get after killing an enemy. With every soul fragment absorbed, you gain 35 Fury plus a 5-second reduction cooldown from I-Beam from the trait. Combine that with the pace of a Mythic Plus dungeon between getting fragments from dead enemies and the ones that spawn from Chaos Strike, and they can indeed spawn from Chaos Cleave, your AoE damage is going to be far superior than the previous build, and you are in far more control of your Fury resource, getting almost constant I-beams, which in turn turns you into meta for some death sweeps and annihilations as said before, then getting more fragments and just go into this loop of crazy numbers flying all over your screen. Just make sure that you won't overcap your fury before casting your I-beam, as it's going to give a quite big chunk of it. Always cast it when at least below 50% of your fury. The same follows for absorbing soul fragments. Your single target damage though isn't as good as a Demon Blades build, comparably, especially in the meta phase, as you're going to have to waste time building up fury by casting Demon's Bite instead of just spamming your Chaos Strikes with the passive fury builder from Demon Blades. So your single target burst isn't as good, but there is an interesting aspect about it. So for single target in general, it's pretty simple. Build up fury with Demon's Bite and spend said fury on Chaos Strikes, then adding in I-beam whenever off cooldown for the 8-second meta and the extra fury it gives off, plus running around sort of like Pac-Man to get all of the soul fragments for even more fury, and use all of your other cooldowns when needed, but do try to combine them with Nemesis, which is your go-to for single target. If you spect into First Blood, just fit it in just as said previously. Again, your damage won't be as great, but you get meta more frequently, so make good use out of those 8 seconds. Save up soul fragments if need be to fit in more annihilations. For burst though, is where things get a little bit interesting because of your meta and your demonic talent combo, along with Demon Reborn talent, because using I-beam before using Metamorphosis will actually increase its duration for the 8 seconds, but only once. Meaning, if you have Demon Reborn, you can do it twice, one before and one after. So the idea is the same as previously. Nemesis, Fury of Illidari, and then Demon's Bite to build Fury. Don't pop meta yet. Once with enough fury for I-beam, use it, then immediately use meta after. Now he's on about a 36-second duration instead of 30, due to stacking both demonic and the actual meta. But due to Demon Reborn, your I-beam cooldown was refreshed. So, if with enough fury, you can use it right away, further increasing the duration for 8 seconds more, plus all that damage and fury. Then after, just go on your rotation of building up fury from soul fragments or Demon's Bite and waste on Chaos Strikes or annihilations and blade dances / death sweep if spec'd. If you're lucky with your soul fragment drops, you can cast another I-beam, but it doesn't seem to increase the duration past that one time, but you can still increase it once before and one after popping meta. Getting the soul fragments will highly increase your DPS for the extra fury and I-beams. But bear in mind that it will highly depend on the RNG aspect of Demon Appetite. So in situations that there's going to be cleave / AoE, or better yet, trash, will be far easier as you're going to get a lot more fragments from Chaos Cleave or as the mobs die. And again, make sure to not overcap Fury with Soul Fragment absorbs or Fury generation from I-beam. Then after all of that, just repeat previous steps. Now just some extras and then the final conclusion. Do use your Chaos Nova stun whenever you can to help out your group. It really helps in those hard mythic pluses, and it can give you some extra soul fragments for the demonic build, or just for your I-beam cooldown. The other is your interrupt. It gives you 50 fury per interrupt, so even if there's a spell going off that isn't dangerous, just interrupt it to get that fury. But obviously, prioritize dangerous ones. The other is mobility. You have fantastic mobility. Between Vengeful Retreats and Fell Rushes, or even Fellblade, do make good use out of all of them. But one thing to keep in mind is to plan your Vengeful Retreats and Fell Rushes. Don't use it without thinking, making you rush to the other side of the room only to come running back in turn, losing DPS. In single target, you shouldn't be using it at all unless if you need to move. But for AoE, if you need to use it for the damage, and not just for the momentum buff, make sure where you're going to land is not far from the enemies or that you have another charge to quickly get back. Don't be rushing and then running and jumping back like an idiot. That said, let's look at the stats. As said previously, Critical Strike is your most important stat above anything. You want to get as much as you can to highly boost your damage along with sustainability for the Fury refund from Chaos Strike. After it is Mastery, as increases your Chaos damage percentage and movement speed. Most of your abilities are Chaos damage based, so it's a flat damage increase to them, and is particularly powerful for Chaos Blade's talent as its damage increase is dependent on it. Then Haste and Versatility. Haste can be powerful for faster attacks and in turn faster Demon Blade procs for more fury, but both crits and Mastery outweigh it. As for enchants and consumables, as you might have guessed, you want all the crit that you can, both from foods, enchants and gems. Your neck enchant should be Mark of the Claw for the crits, and your go-to pot is Potion of Old War, but Potion of Prolonged Power can be good as well. Then your legendaries. The Ring Anger of the Half Giants is one of your most powerful Legos, highly boosting your sustainability in Fury and in turn more Chaos Strikes. The shoulders can also be extremely powerful for the reduction of cooldown of your meta. If you have those two, you are set. But the trinket or even the other ring are pretty good as well. The head is particularly good for the demonic build or just AoE in general, same for the boots. The wrists though might push you into getting the Bloodlet talent. I don't have that legendary so I can't say much, but looking at both builds, you shouldn't be looking at changing those two current talents, so test your own results. Then you have your utility or situational ones, which you should only use for specific situations or if you have nothing better. That about covers it all. In general, Havoc is not a hard spec to master. You have two distinct builds that you can play around with, and that optimally you should be looking to change according to which content or encounters you're doing. Both perform well, it's just that Demon Blade's build will do better for single target damage and burst, while Demonic will fare better in AoE and burst, but won't be good for single target as Demon Blades, as Demon Blades will still do good AoE damage, just not as good as Demonic. With that said, there's some changes you can do. As with Legion, there's very little talents that you will deem completely worthless. In Demonic, for an example, you can pick First Blood and Nemesis for single target if you so wish, but Fell Eruption can also be good for specific encounters or situations that a stun will come in handy. In the Demon Blades build, you can switch Demon Blades talent for Demonic Appetite, if you despise the playstyle like myself, and you get Demon's Bite back, so you can actually have something to always click instead of just relying on the RNG gods. Will it be as good? Probably not, but if it's more fun for you, go ahead. As always guys, thank you for watching. If you have any questions regarding the Havoc Demon Hunter, feel free to leave them down below. Subscribe and like for more videos and class guides. Have fun and see ya.